Hello and welcome to the EPRI Current. I'm your host, Samantha Gilman, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that has been very top of mind for the energy industry for the last week or so, and that was the blackout that occurred on Monday, April 28th on the Iberian Peninsula with Spain, Portugal, and parts of France. Now, as some of you might know, EPRI was actually born out of the blackout 52 years ago. And we've learned a lot since then. I'm joined by two EPRI experts, Eamonn Lannoye, Director of EPRI Europe, and Sean McGuiness, Senior Technical Executive, to talk a bit about what we know, what we don't know, potentially how this happened, and how we can keep it from happening again. All right, so let's just get right into it. Can you tell us what happened? What do we know? What do we not know?
So on Monday, April 28th, it's April. So the power system normally has its peak load periods in either the winter or in the summers, driven by heating and cooling. So we're in between. They call the shoulder seasons for in the power system. That they call that for a couple of reasons. One, the weather is not so hot, not so cold, so it doesn't drive a lot of load. We're kind of in that in-between period. The in-between period is when a lot of construction work happens on the system, maintenance work happens on the system, and the system conditions can be quite variable. You can have, really clear or really windy days on the system, so that's important from a renewables point of view, from wind and solar. And you can equally have days on the system where there's rainy, there's a lot of fog, and we're not fully out of winter yet. So that's the kind of main characteristics of what those shoulder months are. So on April 28th, we were in the shoulder month. There would have been a fair bit of maintenance happening in power systems all around the world. Spain and Portugal no different from the rest of the world. Temperatures were okay. They were kind of mid-20s, not so bad. Clear sky day, so quite high renewable penetration. Or the solar that was on that system that day would have had a very clear run. There wasn't big storms moving across. So it was a kind of a lower wind production day, which is important in Spain, as well as Portugal and the European system in general. So this is kind of the timing and the weather related aspects to it. And then you look at the system itself. Spain and Portugal are part of the continental European system. Their markets are linked. They clear day ahead and in real day. Their operation. They're electrically synchronized with the rest of the continental European system. So they're operated together with the other system operators from around Europe. So they're managing the system together, each their own responsible control area. So that was happening. And then as we saw a Monday morning profile start to happen. Load is lower in the nighttime. You start to ramp up into the morning, and so that is what happened. Load got to about 25 gigawatts in Spain, about 8 gigawatts in Portugal. So it's a reasonable level for a peak. Not very high. Their peaks are typically a bit higher than that. So kind of a normal, more benign operating condition running up into the morning. You see the solar start to appear on the system. Over 20 gigawatts of solar was appearing just as you went into past midday. A lot of that is solar PV, like the panels, but Spain also has some solar thermal, which is a different type of solar that concentrates heat. So they had a mix of both, most of which was solar PV, the panels you see on the roof. And also on the system at that time in Iberia, there was quite a portion of hydro generation. Some hydro was pumping at the time. They were filling up the storage for the evening peak. There was some nuclear at that time, and there was exports happening just out of Spain into France right up into the midday. And that's just after midday is when the event started to unfold. So that's kind of the situation as it rolled into the event.
Pretty much from midday then, we don't have an official explanation, so we can really only go on what's available in the public domain. Unfortunately, with a limited data set, it's easy to speculate, but with limited data, you can come to incorrect conclusions. So we'll just stick to the facts for what we are aware of. And there will be a preliminary report due out very soon, if not already. So the event really began shortly after noon when a number of system oscillations were identified on the system. So oscillations are essentially where you have power plants. Normally they have flat output unless the market or the grid operator tells them to move up or down. Sometimes oscillations happen. The generator output, begins to swing up and down. If they're small in magnitude, they're no big deal. They're pretty well understood. A lot of them happen in Europe, but they're well damped out. Sometimes they just decay themselves and disappear within a few seconds. Sometimes the system operator has to take some actions to resolve them. So there was a few of those identified in the maybe 30 minutes prior to the event, several of them. But again, they are not usually enough to cause a blackout, but they were noted to be present. So I guess moving on from that, then getting closer to the event itself, the real event itself started about just after 12:30, and essentially what happened was a power plant in the south of Spain tripped offline. Power plants are extremely complex machines. There's many thousands of individual components. So sometimes they trip off. These are well expected to happen. So all grids carry sufficient reserve that if they do trip, there's plenty of slack there to pick them up. So customers never even noticed this happening. So this first tripping happened. The system picked up the slack. It was nothing really. Then about 19 seconds later, a second power plant tripped. And again, the system had enough slack that it seems to have been able to stabilize that, certainly within about a second and a half. However, after that second and a half, a third event happened where one or more large power plants tripped. And this then had pushed the grid way outside of its ability to absorb that loss. It didn't have any really reserve to cater for it. And essentially that's where the blackout happened from there. So essentially in the seconds after that, the grid collapsed. After the first and second events, there was support from neighboring countries, from Spain and Morocco and Portugal. But really once the third generator tripped, or set of power plants tripped, that was too much for them to be able to supply. And the grid interconnecting France to Spain automatically and correctly disconnected, leaving Spain islanded, and then regrettably it collapsed and blacked out totally. So that's essentially the sequence of events and how things evolved. It does seem to be that the grid initially reacted as expected, but was pushed beyond its ability to remain stable and collapsed.
So how is this different than other blackouts in recent history?
Well, I guess if you look at most blackouts, in most cases, they're driven by severe weather, maybe hurricanes or extreme snow or and so on. So it's very easy to visually see that. You see power lines on the ground, you've damage to property and so on. So that's typically how it happens, and that's easy to kind of see and experience. But this case, it was something that was, we'll say, less transparent to most customers. It was a sunny day. There was nothing really abnormal about it. The grid wasn't excessively stressed. It was, it's a peak load of about 40 gigawatts. So it was about 25 gigawatts of demand at the time. So the fact that it went from a relatively benign state to collapsing over the course of, between 5 and 24 seconds was something that was unexpected, I guess. But from that second trip to the last one of maybe 5 seconds, that was extremely fast for a grid to collapse. So typically when we see a blackout happening, it begins to evolve over tens of seconds, maybe over several minutes, where things begin to degrade and eventually collapse. This was very, very fast. So this has kind of created a lot of questions around the world for how this happened and how it happened so quickly. And we're really looking forward to seeing the preliminary report come out of Spain to understand better what happened. But essentially, that's why it is unique and why it is so much interest to the world.
So something I've seen quite a bit in the media is around how solar power could have played a role, or this concept of inertia. Can you explain what that is, and was it a factor, and could that be a factor in other regions on future blackouts?
So it must be said that this blackout was extremely rare. Blackouts are major events, are extremely rare in nature. I think the Spanish government indicated that this hadn't happened for 50 years or so, and certainly they're extremely rare to come by where the system totally blacks out. Systems. It's also true that systems operate on an increasingly regular basis with a lot of solar on the system. So those two things, whether confidence, whether it was a initiating event or not, we don't know yet. We do know that there was a lot of solar on the system at the time, and everything that's on the system, the way it's configured, how load is, the flows on the network, how load is behaving, all of those things play a role to some greater or lesser extent. And that's only really going to be possible to tell what had a bigger role than not once we see the investigative report produced. So from that point of view, we still don't know. Now, what we do know from the facts is there was a lot of solar on and a little bit of wind at the time. And the important thing about that, or the noteworthy thing, is that it's interfaced with the grid, like batteries and like HVDC international ties in Europe. They're interfaced with inverters. So the way they connect and synchronize with the grid is through inverters. And they're power electronics. That's like a computer is in there deciding how that interface, how the power is going to be injected into the system, or how they're going to relate. That's different from how gas turbines and nuclear plants and hydro plants typically operate, because they have big rotating motors, synchronous generators that behave a certain way according to physics. And we have a long operating history with those. We've had blackouts where that has played a role. Controls around synchronous generation have played a role. And that has happened previously in the Iberian case, around controllers and system separations previously. And there have been events related to inverters. We don't know what kind of event this was. And again, we'll need to see. It is worthy also to say that when you have more inverters on the system, the dynamics, like Sean made the point earlier, the speed at which things change in the system is faster. So you're dealing with faster changes in the system, faster controls, and so on. Again, we don't know if that made a difference or not. We'll find out in the investigative report, but it is a feature of systems with a lot of inverters connected and producing at that time, that the decisions, the dynamics are faster, and you have to manage for that. System operators have known that this is going to happen, have studied a lot of those different considerations to it. So it's not a surprise, but it is a feature that needs to be actively managed. All the procedures need to be in place. Grid codes need to be in place. Needs to be operationally managed, and settings all coordinated to be able to manage it. So we don't know.
You mentioned multiple times that we don't have all the information yet. We don't have the final report. Why does it take so long to investigate a blackout?
It really, with these blackouts, it's very easy to say, well, this happened and therefore that's the cause. But in reality, in Spain alone, there's probably 700 substations. In Portugal, there's probably about nearly 90. You need to check measurements from multiple locations across there. So there's many thousands of measurements you need to check. There are log files that need to be collected. All of them need to be time synchronized and verified against each other. Gathering those gigabytes of data together and developing that exact sequence of events is critically important to building up the evidence case to be certain that your explanation is valid and correct. It's very important to establish the cause and effect. You may think you're correct with that by just looking at some data points, but you really do need a comprehensive countrywide set of measurements to verify you know exactly how it started, you know exactly what happened next, and exactly that cause and effect. So in most cases, that can be available. They can remotely access that. In others, someone has to physically drive out to site and collect that data. They may have to interview power plant owners and gather information from them. So if you begin to build up all of that picture for everyone to do their jobs, there's many hundreds of people involved. And when you try to collect that together, that is something that just can't be done overnight. Once you have collected all of that data and you've developed a sequence of events, you generally then want to try and replicate the event. So grid operators have models of their system, and they will try to set it up so to match the grid as it was just before the event and see if they can replicate it. So do their models show the grid collapsing in that way? And does that align with the measurements that they see all around their grid? Again, these are very sophisticated advanced studies. They need to be precise and everything needs to be checked. So this is a rigorous exercise performed by professional engineers, and it's to do it right and to do it accurately and to give us answers rather than jumping to conclusions is something that needs to be built up slowly. And unfortunately, that means it's can take at least weeks, if not several months, to gather all of the information and make engineering conclusive, scientific based answers to all of that. And once we have those solid kind of explanations of what happened, then we have a very solid basis to identify if the grid needs to be changed or what mitigation methods may be required in future.
So then, generally speaking, what could grid operators do to keep the power on and increase resilience?
Yeah, so like we both mentioned already, this is an exceptionally rare event, and that the grid deals with tens of incidents a day, and you don't notice any major impact on your lights. Maybe the odd time the light flickers, so there is already incredible reliability and resilience built into the system. You're starting from a very high bar, notwithstanding the fact that there was just a blackout, and that we don't again know the complete circumstances. But how to improve upon that? It comes from different ways. It's easy to jump to the conclusion that we should have more hardware on the system, and many times, there are cases where that could be the case, and there are cases where adding more hardware to the system may not be the case. And we don't yet know really what was the chain of events that led from one to the next to be able to say whether reinforcing in terms of adding more hardware on the system would have benefited in this case or not. There are other cases where it would, or strengthening it. There's other ways that are really important to understand holistically how resilience is built in the system. So there's the process going from planning into commissioning into operating, maintaining units, all the different types of assets on the system. At each point, there will be learnings from this event, like there are from every other event, that when they're absorbed into the process, you may add a check, or you will perform a new type of study, or do it a different way, or look at multiple different scenarios that you might have not looked for. We again don't know, but the process piece is critical, and understanding how all the pieces fit together usually happens in that process piece, where we make learnings, upgrades from the improvements. The next bit is like codes and standards. There's already as much regulation as you can read in your lifetime around how these assets are all intended to behave, but those continually evolve. And they evolve sometimes because we can see issues coming, and sometimes it's hard won experience through lessons like this. So I'm sure at some point in the future there will be codes and standards that will be reviewed to understand whether they cover this type of event or not. So that's like resilience coming through there. And then there's the human factors piece. Is just training to be able to understand how to operate these type of situations if there are new type of situations. Making sure that the capabilities are there in the control centers or the field staff or in the commissioning. There's that human factors element that will help as well. Again, it's going to be lessons learned from this, and then that'll be the first part. The second part will be internalizing it back into process, and that's again here at EPRI where we do a lot of looking at what happened in different events, studying how does it affect all these different pieces, and try to help grid operators or asset owners or developers or whoever else internalize those and bring it into their own day-to-day. So it's a bit of everything, Samantha.
So that was all the questions I had for you two, but I want to give each of you an opportunity to leave any final thoughts with our listeners. Is there anything that pertains to this that you didn't get a chance to say? And I'll also note that we will have resources in our episode description about this, and we'll keep it updated as we learn more. So, Sean, any final thoughts on this for our listeners?
I guess like blackouts, as Eamon said, are very rare. One relatively positive note was that the restoration time was relatively pretty much as fast as one could expect for extremely complex grid like the ones in Spain and Portugal. So the fact that the grid could get fully restored in Spain's case in less than 23 hours is pretty much comparable with countries internationally. So it was good to see it restored, that there was no delay. People weren't without power for days and things like that, and everyone got restored quickly. I think that's a positive aspect to emphasize. The other side of it is really for the event itself, the fact that we are still a certain amount in the dark for what actually happened. But a lot of people are jumping to conclusions based on limited information, and everyone wants to blame everybody else. But I think they're building up the data sets there to be able to make good engineering informed explanation of what happened. And once that, we encourage everyone to wait for that to come out, and then we can see for how we can build up the resilience of the grid rather than identifying scapegoats and attacking those. So I think we're all looking forward to the reports and seeing where this can go, so the entire industry can learn from the event and build up the resilience and reliability of grids worldwide. And that's certainly something here at EPRI that we try to facilitate and encourage and share through our research.
Eamon, what about you?
It's same messages as Sean, to be honest. There's a lot of unknowns yet, and there's some facts that we know already, but more road to run. There is even more road to run after we know what happened in getting the lessons that will inevitably fall from this blackout into practice. So yeah, we're looking forward to that journey as well. And just to reiterate that point again, like the situation that they were operating the grid in is increasingly common. The dynamics of those systems are quite fast, and there's a lot happening in those systems at the same time. So yeah, again, a little bit of pause. There's no bad thing right now to be able to give us time to understand. There's any number of wrong conclusions that could be drawn right now, but what will be valuable is to draw the right one. So let's put our effort into that.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining me today on the EPRI Current to talk about this very, very timely topic. And with that, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. If you liked today's show, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and feel free to share with your colleagues and friends. For more information about EPRI, please visit our website at www.epri.com. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and X at EPRI News. Together, we're shaping the future of energy.